Well, it sure didn't take long for the Sacramento Kings to find their guy. Scott Perry is back in the Sacramento Kings front office, but this time he is the boss. I like the hire for the Kings, but I have a problem with the process. I'll explain why right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long and now all off season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News, and happy first day of the offseason, everybody. The Sacramento Kings not wasting any time getting to work. Now, on one hand, I appreciate the Kings' sense of urgency. Last night, hours, or really only like an hour, after they were embarrassed in their play-in game against the Dallas Mavericks, they fired Monte McNair, or mutually parted ways with general manager Monte McNair. A move that I felt needed to happen. I've been talking about it needing to happen for months. Didn't excuse ownership's part in everything, and we'll talk a lot about ownership again on today's podcast and throughout this offseason that we have to look forward to. But firing Monte McNair, a move that needed to happen. Really 10 hours later, Scott Perry is hired as the general manager of the Sacramento Kings going forward. Now, before I dive into the issue that I have with the process of hiring Scott Perry, let's talk about Scott specifically. Me personally, I like this hire. And very similar to the things that I talk about when talking about Doug Christie as the Kings' future head coach, if he is to get that job, which I kind of feel like it's going to be his job at this point. When it comes to my concerns about the hiring of Scott Perry, it actually has very little to do with Scott personally. It has everything to do with the organization. Again, I'll get to that later on because I want to make sure I make it perfectly clear and I emphasize to you that Scott Perry, the NBA executive, the seasoned, respected NBA executive, I think is a good decision for this organization to hire as their main guy. He is more than qualified for the job. He's been an NBA executive for a very long time. He worked with the New York Knicks, the Orlando Magic, the Seattle Supersonics in their front offices, and for the very brief span of 3 months in 2017, Scott Perry was one of the lead assistant general managers to Vlade Divac. So that's why I say this is Perry returning to the Sacramento Kings. He was incredibly popular here. He just left very quickly because he got the opportunity to be the top man of the New York Knicks. That's why his absence or his departure was kind of so quick and so abrupt. It wasn't because of any issue with him and this front office or anything like that. It was just another opportunity came up for him to be the top guy. He took it. Whatever happened in New York happened. Now this opportunity opens itself up in Sacramento. Scott Perry, very well respected around the league, has a great reputation amongst agents, which is very important, but has a very, very, very strong reputation amongst players, which of course is a big deal as a general manager. So there's a lot on the resume of Scott Perry that Monte McNair can't really hang a hat on. I know McNair spent, I think, 13 seasons with the Houston Rockets under Daryl Morey in some capacity. I don't take that away from him. Perry has had a vast, extensive career as an executive in this league. And I agree with everybody who's saying the Kings needed to go a route that was more of a seasoned veteran and less of a first-time GM like Vlade Divac and Monte McNair were. I agree with that 100%. So what do I have a problem with? I have a problem with the process of this hiring. Really, in many ways, a lack thereof. There was no official search, no interviewing a bunch of different candidates. Just, this is the guy we want. We go out and get him 10 hours after firing Monte McNair. Now, let's not be naive about this situation. Clearly, this has been in the works for a while. Reportedly, these conversations have been ongoing, maybe even for weeks. So, on one hand, I'm a little concerned about that aspect because they clearly felt that they were going to be moving on from Monte McNair weeks ago, which, to some extent, I understand. I get that because I thought the writing was on the wall in order to do that. But while they had essentially a lame duck general manager sitting there waiting for his waiting to be fired, right? Waiting for his end. You're already talking to and flirting, I guess, with his replacement. Now, look, I know the way the league works. Just because you're not allowed to talk to a player before a certain time or talk to an executive before a certain time doesn't mean conversations aren't always happening at all times. I'm not naive to that. But I'm a little bothered, well, more than a little bothered by the fact that, one, the Kings just went out and hired somebody without even having a conversation with a Bob Myers or other potential candidates that are out there. At the very least, invite them in. Take a week to talk to different people and get their 2 cents on where you're at as an organization, what they would do to try and fix this. Like, at the very least, have those conversations. I'm all for the hiring of Scott Perry. If you have those conversations and you still felt Scott was 100% our guy, he's the guy that we wanted, then great. I appreciate the sense of urgency and I appreciate not wanting to waste time. But you've got nothing but time this offseason. You were just eliminated on April, 16th? The NBA Finals aren't going to be done for another month and a half to 2 months. You've got more than enough time before you have to have a general manager in place to make decisions about the draft, free agency, so on and so forth. So this was not a trade deadline type scenario. You had time to, at the very least, have the conversations. But whatever, you got your guy. And I am excited and intrigued to see what Scott Perry will do here in Sacramento. The other aspect of this that I don't like, though, is if you knew Monte McNair was, for lack of a better term, a dead man walking, why did you allow him to trade your franchise player? Now, maybe at that time, you didn't think that Monte McNair's days were numbered. Maybe at that time, you weren't having conversations with Scott Perry yet. But at that time, I was saying on this podcast, and I know if I'm saying on this podcast, there are hopefully smarter people than me in that organization and around that organization that are saying the same thing. Hey, maybe don't let the guy who's either on the way out or desperate to save his job make a decision on your franchise player that could completely disrupt your future, which is exactly what has happened. You allowed Monte to execute this trade of your franchise player in De'Aaron Fox for a package that brought you back Zach LaVine to make the Chicago Bulls West, which shockingly didn't work in the play-in, all for the mandate of making the playoffs, even though it would have been a feeble playoff appearance, if that. You allowed him to make that decision when you could have put Fox in the hands of Perry to either salvage that relationship, if it was even salvageable, or given him the time this offseason to look for potentially better options. That's what I was arguing all along. And when I put that out there, the biggest counter argument that I've seen, and a lot of it is based off of an article from The Athletic, from Sam Amick and Anthony Slater, they put out last night, talking about, or really it was this morning, talking about this, like the fall of Monte McNair. This was before Scott Perry was hired, by the way. And in the article, it mentioned Scott Perry being the guy that the Kings were strongly considering to give the job. It mentioned in that article, Monte McNair, according to league sources, was against firing Mike Brown. Monte McNair was against trading De'Aaron Fox. Okay, so you're telling me that if that's true, then ownership, Vivek, forced his hand to trade for Zach LaVine, who's a player that we know Vivek Ranadive has loved for years. That makes a ton of sense, and it also makes it even worse. So my concern with the Kings hiring Scott Perry this quickly is that the Kings are bringing back someone who is very familiar with how Vivek and this organization operates. Someone who was the assistant to Vlade Divac, therefore has close ties to Vlade Divac. And we've seen Vlade back and around more often. Sam Amick, in an article earlier this season, a month ago or so, mentioned Vlade Divac being around more and people taking more notice to that. Well, it would have been PR suicide for the Sacramento Kings to rename Vlade Divac as their general manager after everything that happened. Of course, they could not do that. So what do? They go out and get his former assistant that Vlade can continue to advise in his advisor role with the Kings and with Vivek Ranadive. And Vivek has had a number of advisors that more often than not have just gotten in the way over the course of his ownership tenure. You bring in a guy that's familiar with with Vlade, a guy that's familiar with Vivek, and a guy that's maybe a little more willing to listen to Vivek and ownership and the organization. We want Doug Christie as our head coach. So, hey, Mr. New General Manager, if we give you the job, what do you think about just making Doug Christie your head coach? I'm not against Doug as the head coach of the Sacramento Kings going forward. Not at all. I'm against the Sacramento Kings imposing that decision on Scott Perry or anybody. I don't care who Vivek wants. I don't care who Matina wants. I don't care who Vlade wants. They're allowed to weigh in with their opinion, but their opinion is not the final say. If Scott Perry is your general manager going forward, he deserves 100% decision-making power. He is the end-all, be-all. He is the final voice. He is not going to have an assistant general manager like Wes Wilcox 2.0 who handles and is the final say on some things while Perry's the final say on other things, and then Vivek ultimately has to sign off on anything. Get rid of all of that. If Doug Christie is going to be your head coach going forward, it's because it needs to be Scott Perry's decision 100%, not a decision influenced by Vivek and Vlade in the hiring of Perry because they want Doug Christie long term. Does that make sense? These are the concerns that I have with this organization. This is the trust and the lack of faith, lack of trust, lack of faith that I have in this organization because they have not earned it, because they've continued this pattern over and over and over again over the last 12, 13 years. Why do I want the Kings to go through a legitimate front office search with multiple interviews, even if they landed on the same decision of Scott Perry? Because that's the traditional way to do it. I'm tired of the Kings doing everything by their book and not the textbook, because their book has led to failure after failure after failure. That's where I'm at. Has very little to do with Scott Perry, everything to do with this organization and the vicious bad cycle that they've put themselves in time and time again. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Finding the right talent is so important, right? If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. There's fast and easy hiring. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, you'll have multiple qualified candidates to choose from. They have cost-efficient growth. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. These are all the things that you can get on Upwork.com. So head there right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. So today, in addition to the Scott Perry news, we had exit interviews at the Golden One Center, speaking to a handful of Sacramento Kings players. Now, I'm going to play a lot of these exit interviews or snippets of these exit interviews over the next handful of podcasts because I didn't just want to make one excruciatingly long episode with all of that. But today's podcast, you're going to hear from Domantas Sabonis here in a second. And then towards the end of the podcast, you're going to hear from Demar DeRozan. But we start with Domantas Sabonis. I'll play for you his entire exit interview here, and I'll share with you just a couple of takeaways, what stood out to me in his exit interview.
Morning, Domas. If you can just describe the past 12 hours since the loss, the play-in loss, and just what that's been like with the departure of Monte and now the hiring of Scott.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. I'm hearing news as the meetings go on. So yeah, I don't have much to say right now. Just trying to take it all in.
Domas, when you look at your future, it's been widely reported that you want to know some answers on where the direction goes within this organization. What factors are you thinking about and considering when you're asking about being in Sacramento long term?
First of all, I want to say I love it here. You know, I want to stay here. I want to win here. I also do want to know what's going to happen. You know, all these things are happening so quick. You know, I want to get together with the new people, whoever comes in, you know, and really try to get this right, you know, and get it back to where it was year one.
Domas, along those lines, do you want to have a say? Like, if you are in the cards for this going forward, do you want to have an active voice and a say in maybe directions and decisions going forward?
Yeah, I wish, you know, that would be great, you know, to trust some of your guys who've been here longer on how to try and change things around.
I guess along those lines, you just said you're kind of learning of the news as it's happening. Did anybody consult you at all, whether that be with the Monte decision or the hiring or anything?
No, nothing at all.
And then can I just ask you about Keegan Murray had a little bit of an up and down season offensively. Obviously, he took on a larger defensive role this year, but how would you just evaluate Keegan's season?
You know, he stayed professional. He stayed working. You know, it's only his third year, and this is probably my craziest year in the league too. So for him to go through that really early, I'm happy he had some good vets around him, you know, that we could help him out and get through the year, you know, and he really embraced his role as it changed throughout the season.
Domas, Doug Christie, you work with him a lot into your home country. Just wanted to, to get your thoughts on him and the work that he did this season, which was under some really extreme circumstances.
Yeah, he loves the team, he loves the franchise, he loves the city. He's gonna give everything he has, you know, every day, and I feel like that's why we work so good. You know, we were just together in the office talking. If he does get the job, what's gonna happen this summer? You know, who am I gonna work with and stuff like that. You know, so I love Doug to death. You know, and we'll see what happens.
Domas, we didn't have a chance to ask you last night just your thoughts on last night's game and your personal performance and just the frustration you might have had with the result of last night and how it all went in that second quarter.
I just feel like we had a plan that we practiced, 3 days, and we didn't execute the plan, nor defense or offense, and that was the outcome.
Demar talked a little bit about the need for some tweaks. Obviously, this team went through a lot of injuries, a lot of changes, ups and downs, and it's understandable that it would be hard to be cohesive on the court. What, in your estimations, do you agree with that there needs to be some tweaks, and maybe where would be a spot that you think?
The biggest thing is we need a point guard. That's for sure.
Domas, I know it's still raw last night, but how do you guys move forward as a group, and how much do you want to have a stamp on what goes on moving forward?
We just want to get this right. I feel like the locker room, there's a great group of guys who want to really compete, do the right things, put in the work, and wherever this organization wants to go with the next steps that happen over the past couple hours, it's good with us. We just want to be heard, and really know where things are going to go forward.
Domas, you're talking about how you're kind of learning all this as it comes. Are these the kind of things that you would wish that you had more that were maybe communicated more with you, or is that just kind of the role of the player in this league, and this is what you guys have to deal with?
I think it's kind of the role of the player in this league. Obviously there are some franchises that do that with some players, but not everybody gets that luxury, which is totally fine, But yeah, like I said before, things have just been happening so quick.
Domas, you talk about kind of being involved in this stuff and talking about how to change things around. Like, what's top of mind for you when you think of how to change things around or make improvements here?
I would say just like this year there was a new coach, new everything. Changes happen throughout the year, so it's obviously tough to try and fix things together. But if we can organize everything throughout the summer, so going into training camp and season, everybody has a role and a position and a job and knows what to do, that would be very helpful.
Domas, given everything that happened this season, from Mike to Fox being traded and just everything in between, how together has this locker room stayed and this group stayed, and how has that side of this season been?
That side's been amazing. I would say it's probably one of the best locker rooms I've been a part. Guys are great. Guys love hanging out with each other on and off the court, and I have no complaints with that.
So a couple things that jump off the page to me and what Sabonis had to say. Number one, he says, and he emphasizes, he was not consulted on any decisions up to this point with the organization. I find that hard to believe. Do I think Sabonis is outright lying? Well, I certainly hope not. And maybe he wasn't directly approached and say, hey, Domas, what do you think about this? Or we'd like your opinion on this. But clearly, Sabonis's feelings on certain situations, from Mike Brown to Doug Christie to Malik Monk coming back, all these things that Sabonis has been vocal about, clearly all those played a factor in the Kings making the decisions that they made this season and getting to where they're at. So I'm a little skeptical in the belief that Sabonis wasn't truly consulted or considered in the decisions they made. Finally, kind of building off of that, you heard Domas basically saying that he wants to be involved in future decisions. Now, this is another thing that I kind of rolled my eyes at when I heard it, because it's natural for the star. Well, he's supposed to be the star. Sure as hell didn't play like it. It's natural for the star to want to be involved, to want to have a say, to want to at least weigh in on the decisions going forward. Or at least have his thoughts considered, at the very least. It's kind of common courtesy amongst like your top players or your franchise players. But again, the Kings are largely in the position that they're in right now because of preferences of Sabonis and a couple other teammates, and ultimately it has not worked. And to be completely honest, Domas, if I were you, I'd be less concerned about the future decisions of the organization and more concerned about, hey, when we get back to the postseason, when we get back to meaningful games, that I don't lay an egg again and play poorly like I just did in front of a national TV audience again in that horrendous loss to the Dallas Mavericks. Just two takeaways of mine from Sabonis's exit interviews. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where the heck did all my money go? I mean, it happens to me. Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, plus those pesky bills, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and actually start building wealth. There's some incredible insights that you're going to get on your spending habits, how much money you spend in certain areas, how much money is going to coffee or to entertainment, or how much money do you not realize is going to like subscriptions and things like that. There's all-in-one convenience. You no longer have to have a bunch of different apps plus a Microsoft Excel sheet and all this other stuff. No, it's all in one place for you to manage your money and see all of your accounts, even plan your long-term goals. Plus, managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without any of the added stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Finally, we'll end with this. DeMar DeRozan's exit interview said some things that he kind of alluded to and talked to last night after the Kings lost to the Dallas Mavericks, but you'll hear him talk about the roster needing tweaks, and I wonder how much of the tweak is him no longer being on the roster. You're going to hear here, he doesn't say anything that outwardly suggests that he wants out, even though I still believe it's going to be in the mutual best interest of the organization and DeMar to part ways this summer. I would be very surprised if DeMar is back with the Sacramento Kings next year, but there's nothing really in this exit interview that makes me feel like, oh yeah, DeMar DeRozan is for sure gone. And then you're going to hear DeMar talk a lot about the uncertainty of this season and how that uncertainty really is weighing on him and is going to be at the top of his mind when he's making his decisions about what's next for his career. Here is DeMar DeRozan.
Hi, Debo. You said yesterday that this was the toughest year in your 16-year NBA career. When you tack on the last 11 hours, just your reaction to Monty being mutually agreeing to part ways and then now the hiring of Scott Perry?
I mean, it's one of those things I think is just indicative of kind of the season that we had to endure from top to bottom. You know, still kind of really haven't set in yet. You know, really what happened from when Mike was fired to now this, what us just, losing last night, coming down to the fact that, it's no more games right now, so it's definitely been a year.
I see you wearing a Godfather t-shirt, which I think is perfectly apropos for today. But when you, after last night, you were pretty emotional. Just how difficult is it for a player who's been through 16 seasons to sort of feel the weight of, your career, like careening towards the end, and what an early exit means for that?
I mean, it's difficult. It's frustrating. It's emotional. I mean, it's everything when, I only can speak for myself. Like, I put so much time, effort, preparation, sacrifice into, the game of basketball. As much as I care for it, as much as I live it, it's hurtful when you just don't give yourself an opportunity to, play for what matters, and that's, to make it to the playoffs, give yourself a chance, and then not knowing what could have happened. It sucks, especially when, it's a scary thing when you just realize, like, this is summer for me to get prepared for my 17th season. Some of my favorite players that I grew up watching, you don't even get close to that number, and to know going into that, the window, closing, it ain't like this job is like being a teacher or being a reporter where y'all can do this as long as you can, So for me, that's where the frustration and the emotional side of it come from.
Debo, I know you said that you're going to take a little bit of time off and try to reevaluate your future, but what factors are you thinking about when it comes to being here in Sacramento long term and thinking about your 17th season next year?
Just a structure of and a foundation of a compete level. I think all year we had such an uncertainty of, of everything. You can't really operate in any successful environment if you have so much uncertainty. I think for me, just the certainty of what is going to be going forward. And I can always work with that. Just the certainty. As long as we put something on the table, this is what it is, this was going to be, this is what we're competing with, I can work with that, But the uncertainty for me has always been the frustrating part.
When you talk about, setting the tables, that's what this organization has to do right now. One of the pieces we're kind of looking at is, the uncertainty or the future of Doug Christie, who had to come in and learn things on the fly and work with you guys and and try to get you guys stabilized and everything. Just wanted to get your thoughts, on working with him, as a professional and him working under those extreme circumstances.
I got all the respect and love for Doug, and I had a relationship with Doug years ago, way before I even ever thought he'd be a coach or I'd be in Sacramento. So the respect and love I have for him is unlimited, and to see him thrown in a position he was thrown in and be able to kind of rally us together when everything was kind of so chaotic. He held his own. First time being in that position with so many uncertainties, like I said, going on. He kept us together. That says a lot. That says the capability that he has to be able to bond a team together, and him just being an ex-player as well. Like I said, I got nothing but the utmost respect for the job that he did under the circumstances.
Debo, obviously, this was a difficult year for everybody, and you've talked about, it being the most difficult for you. But coaches get fired and players get traded and these things every year. Just wondering if you can kind of illuminate a little bit, like on just what made this so difficult. What kind of factors were at play that made you feel that way? I
mean, first time in my career I've dealt with a firing of a coach middle of the season. I've never had that before, so that alone was a first. I just stick with that. I never had that, like coming in and you having your mindset on this one particular thing. Speaking about a coach, he gets fired. Have a GM leave throughout the season. Have a assistant coach leave out throughout the middle of the season. A lot of those things was definitely a first. A lot of stuff that people on the outside may not understand what we go through internally, what we see every day, the people we got to deal with every single day. To see them here and then all of a sudden see them gone. The aura of so many changes like that could change internally that people don't get to see. So that can make it definitely difficult.
Because of that, just along those lines, does it create, I know hindsight's 20/20, but does it create any regret?
No, I don't regret nothing. I don't regret anything. I don't think you can live life with regrets. You just try to learn from it. Nobody never want to take the hard road by choice, but that road came, and now what you do with the experience that you gain from it, that's how I kind of view it.
DeMar, this season, obviously, you guys, we're talking about all these changes that took place. On the court, do you think if this team had like a full season, a training camp, to get prepared for a season, do you think this group has the chemistry and the skill set to really compete at a high level, or do you think that some tweaks need to be made?
I mean, tweaks always need to be made to be consistent. I think we had enough to be able to compete, but to do it on a consistent nightly basis, definitely have to be tweaks that need to be made that fit perfectly. Like I said, we competed with the best teams. We beat Boston, we beat Cleveland twice, but on a consistent level, the right tweaks need to be made so you can do it on a consistent basis. So other than that, we got talented guys, we got guys that's competitors, and at the end of the day, it's the NBA. We're going to be able to win games, but to win enough games to put yourself in not just a playing spot, right there tell you tweaks need to be made.
DeMar, I'd like to ask you about Keegan. A little bit of an up and down season for him, like many others. A lot of inconsistencies offensively for him, but obviously we all see the upside for him as a two-way player. Just, I guess, can you just evaluate his season and maybe his ceiling?
Felt like, Keegan came a long way from an aggressive standpoint. I think the second half of the season, he became more aggressive. We kind of pushed him more. I think I don't think he has a ceiling. I think, his capability is definitely unlimited. I feel like, I hope I get to spend a lot of time with him this summer, just to really push him, to that next level that I think he need, and so you can see the Keegan Murray that everybody expect of him come next year. So, I think for me, that's kind of like my main priority is to be able to spend a lot of time with Keegan this summer.
Malik Monk, how much impact of not having him, on the court to play with y'all, and his
how dynamic Malik is offensively, from being a playmaker, scorer, big shot maker, big shot taker, that alleviates a lot of pressure, off everybody else, whether if it's me, Zach, Keon, Domas, losing that, you're talking about a guy that could, get you 30 points, a guy that could get you 10, 11 assists, a guy that could change the game in a lot of ways with his excitement, not having that out there those last couple of games, it showed, because a game like last night would have been a perfect game that, we needed the Malik that we've been seeing all season.
Again, I'll have way more exit interview content for you. Stuff to hear from Malik Monk, Keon Ellis, Keegan Murray, Trey Lyles, Zach LaVine. There's a lot more that I have for you that I will sprinkle out through the next few podcasts over the next week and some change or whatever to fill you in on everything that you needed to know and needed to hear from the exit interviews here today. Plus, at some point, I imagine soon, we're going to have a press conference to hear from Scott Perry for the first time. I very much look forward to that, not just to hear what he wants to do with this organization, with this roster, and where he wants to take it specifically, but I or someone is going to jump on the opportunity to ask him about the head coach situation and how and if Doug Christie is being strongly considered because of his choice or because of organizational influence. That's going to be a major topic of conversation before, during, and even after the decision to hire Doug Christie or hire somebody else. So that's all still to come on this Locked On Kings podcast as we're just getting this offseason started. It's going to be a wild one. I'll have you covered for it all summer long and then some. Thank you so much for all of you for riding with me throughout the ridiculously chaotic roller coaster of a regular season. Look forward to having you with me every step of the way during this offseason too. Until next time, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.